I hope y'all have fun watching that tremendous slate of games on Sunday and Saturday. This weekend was amazing for football. Amazing weekend for football. So I hope you guys have fun. Now, it's about that time, right? You know, when you ain't in the playoffs, when your team season is over, you got to start reviewing stuff. You got to start putting grades on things. And, well, this is going to be the start of a long week of self-evaluation, or at least evaluation of the Cleveland Browns from my standpoint. So we're going to start with the person who deserves to get criticized, probably the most that's going to get a grade, right? That's going to be Kevin Stefanski. I'm just going to tell you right now, this is not going to be a good grade for Kevin Stefanski. This was not a good year for Kevin Stefanski. I don't know how you could shake it each way that it was. Not a bad enough year to even put him on the hot seat for next year. Pretty bad year, but he has to put like two of these back to back for me to be like, all right, he has to be on the hot seat for the next year because he has accomplished a lot in his first year. So again, we're going to look at this. And the first part I want to bring up in my Kevin Stefanski grade is the Odell situation. I know I'm not here to argue whose fault it was or wasn't between Baker and Odell, because I know we have put that one into the dirt, right? When it comes to arguing about that, we do that all day, all night, and look like Odell might be in the Super Bowl this year, so who knows? But the part of this that we can talk about that I don't think is going to be very polarizing is Kevin Stefanski's role in that whole debacle. We all know that Baker had a role in it. And nationally, Baker's going to take most of the blame because he's the guy on the TV commercials. He's the quarterback. He's the guy that everybody knows. Kevin Stefanski, he's going to get some slack nationally for that, right? Now, I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of this is Kevin Stefanski's fault. I've said this when it happened. I said this after it happened. I said it before it happened. If you've been following this channel since the start of this season, I've been saying, hey, man, these issues with Odell, I think some of this is on Kevin Stefanski. Even when the excuses came out about, oh, it's a rhythm and timing offense. Oh, we can't do it. I'm the one that came out, and it was not popular at the time when I said it, but I remember coming out and saying, hey, if your offense is so rhythm and timing focused that one player running a slightly different variation of a route to get more open throws off the whole thing, then you don't have an offense. That's not anything that's going to work in the playoffs or at the end of the season. Well, what turned out to be true was that, right? I felt like that was something that we could talk about and we were talking about for a while. And with Odell, I think it's the same thing again. Kevin, I think he's probably, if not as responsible as Baker, a little bit more responsible than Baker, right? I'm disappointed at the overall lack of urgency to use him throughout the year. The almost outright refusal to emphasize him in game plans. And look, targets are one thing, right? But when I'm talking about emphasizing, we know when the player is being emphasized, right? When they're running 5 screens to David Njoku, they're trying to get David Njoku gone, right? When they're running design plays for David Njoku, that's them emphasizing David Njoku, right? The Browns, this coaching staff, at least with 2 years of Odell, they have emphasized him one game. And that was a game where Odell gave you incredible numbers, right? The 3-touchdown game versus the Cowboys. Other than that, they did not ever try to emphasize him. I think that's the only time in his entire stay here in Cleveland that a coaching staff actually tried to emphasize Odell in a game plan. I think maybe his first game as a Brown against the Tennessee Titans too. They tried to emphasize him at least early on. But other than that, it's not a bunch of examples, and that's a massive problem to me. I don't know what your philosophy is. I don't know what the thinking was, but clearly Odell is still good at catching footballs in the end zone. And the Browns had issues, right, putting the ball in the end zone this year, especially from like 20 plus, right? Not in the red zone, but like when you're at like the 25, 30, we ended a lot of those drives either going for it or kicking field goals that we missed or things like that, right? And, having a weapon that's pretty good in the red zone would have been helpful, but we did not want to use Odell like that. We use Odell for a decoy to get Anthony Schwartz open. Very dumb. We use Odell as a decoy to get Demetric Felton open. Very dumb. We use Odell as a decoy to get other guys. Like, at what point were we trying to use somebody else as a decoy to get Odell open, right? Like, we weren't ever focused on how we're going to get the ball in the hands of the best players possible to get the ball. And that never happened. Really, it didn't happen as much as we wanted it to happen with Nick Chubb, with Kareem Hunt, clearly with Odell, and even with Jarvis Landry to an extent, right? When the Browns needed to get the ball in the hands of their playmakers, they weren't doing that. They were trying to get the ball to, like, other guys. And that just doesn't sit right with me, right? And that might be play calling. That might be mismanagement. I don't know. Another part of the whole Odell thing that bothered me about how Kevin Stefanski handled it was that this just felt like a breakdown, like mismanagement, a breakdown in communication, just bad. This whole disconnect between Baker and Odell, it seemed like it was allowed to fester and sit unmitigated for far too long. Right? If you notice that there is clear chemistry, and honestly, everybody who has looked at a Browns game over the last 2 years with Odell in there has noticed that there has been a clear issue in chemistry with Baker and Odell that they needed to get together. Or if you're just a coach and you're aware that the narrative is that the quarterback, at the beginning of the season at least, that the quarterback was better without that player. Like, if you're aware of that narrative, I think a lot of coaches would take the extra step and go, hey, I'm going to make sure that whenever this dude gets on the field, we're going to put the ball in his hands. We're going to show everybody that these two can play together and produce well together. And we're going to scheme things up specifically to make that happen, right? If you're aware of that situation, that pressure that's on both Odell and Baker, because I know everybody says, hey, you're not supposed to pay attention to what's out there, but we all know what's out there. They know what's out there. Odell knows that he's being blamed for bad quarterback play. Baker knows that people are blaming Odell for bad quarterback play. They know that tension exists. It does. So to ignore it, to do nothing about it, to not take a step and be like, hey, I'm going to make sure nobody thinks this once we actually start playing games, that's a failure on Kevin Stefanski's part, right? I think this whole Odell thing was mismanaged. I think he dropped the ball on it. And, when you have a player capable of production, any kind of production, and you have to cut him for nothing, basically, and it wasn't like, he had gotten in trouble with the police or something like that where you had to get rid of him. It was a situation that became unbearable in the locker room, according to multiple sources. And that's something that Kevin Stefanski allowed to fester under his control. And when that happens, it's a terrible look, especially for the coach. He's going to get a pass because it's only his second year. People are going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And Baker he's ran out of benefit of the doubt for a lot of people, especially nationally. So Baker's going to eat a lot of the blame on that. But Kevin messed that one up. I really hope he learns from that whole situation, because this seems like it's mismanaged and just bad. It could have been handled much better. I think there's a world where we could have had a productive offense this year, had Odell on it, and had a more together locker room. But that whole Odell thing, having to get rid of him for nothing, watching him play well, it really split up the locker room, especially once the offense started to flatten out at the end of the year. It really did do a number on the locker room. And again, that's on Kevin Stefanski, because that's why he couldn't come back. The next part on this report card that I'm going to put on Kevin Stefanski is Baker. Now, I'm not going to say Baker Mayfield had a bad year because of Kevin Stefanski. I think that's inaccurate. Baker Mayfield had a bad year because Baker Mayfield played terrible football this year. Now, you could blame that on him being injured. You could blame that on whatever. I'm not really interested in all that. I just know that that's why Baker Mayfield did not play well. It's because he played terrible football. Instead, what I am putting on Kevin Stefanski is, once you saw that there was bleeding in that quarterback room, right? Once you saw that the quarterback play had dipped to a level that was concerning, right? I'm talking after the New England game, and if not after that New England game, definitely after the Detroit game, right? Where we had noticed that this quarterback play, whoever's playing it, not what we want right now, right? We can all agree with that, right? Even if you think Baker should come back and should not even be challenged for a spot next year, you have to agree that quarterback play this year, not what we wanted. And some people's solution to this was, hey, Kevin should have just benched him for the year or took him out and told him he couldn't play and put him on injured reserve or this, that, and the third. Other people said he should have just flat out got benched because he wasn't playing well. Either way, we all kind of understand that after that point in the season where we had noticed the quarterback play had been suboptimal, you had to figure out a way to de-emphasize the quarterback's role in the offense. We had to take Baker's responsibility and pare that down and lean on the run game more often. But instead, what happened was that Baker dropped back much more after that point than he had did before that season. Well, before that point in the season, at the very least. And look, I think we can all agree that wasn't the right thing to do. It didn't put the offense in a position to succeed. It didn't put Baker in a position to succeed because, whether you think his bad play is for this, that, or the third, it's kind of like a pitcher, right? If you've seen him give up a bunch of home runs, you need to just get him out the game at some point or lessen their responsibility so it can't stumble. And what I mean by this, right, is with Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan, I think, does a very good job at handling this because Kyle Shanahan, his quarterback is Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I want you guys to look at Jimmy Garoppolo's playoff record. It's pretty good. It's a 4-1 playoff record, right? He's only lost one game in the Super Bowl, but he has a terrible touchdown to interception ratio. He is, in fact, have never won a playoff game in which he has thrown a touchdown in. That's Jimmy Garoppolo's playoff resume. It's not good. It's Andy Dalton bad, but the win-loss record is good. Why is that? It's because the way Kyle Shanahan handles these situations and handles his relationship with Jimmy G is if he notices that Jimmy G is going to be real Jimmy G, he's just going to run the ball a ton. He's just going to lean on that, right? If he doesn't think that Jimmy G can provide him anything well, he's just going to lean on the run game. Almost like he had a game where he had Jimmy G throw like 7 times and it wasn't even raining, right? That's what Kyle Shanahan is willing to do. He is willing to go all the way in the opposite direction if he sees a problem. And that is precisely why Kyle Shanahan has been able to squeeze all that juice out of Jimmy Garoppolo throughout his entire career. It's not because Jimmy Garoppolo is like this great quarterback in the playoffs or anything. He's pretty bad in the playoffs. It's because Kyle Shanahan knows how to manage that situation. He knows that, hey, if I'm not getting great quarterback play, I'm just going to run the ball, right? The problem Kevin Stefanski had this year was that he was not getting great quarterback play. And instead of just going, all right, we're just going to go in the opposite direction and adjust, he said, I have to find a way to fix this quarterback play. And it kept getting worse and worse. Sometimes it's better to just make the adjustment than to spend a day and a half trying to fix the problem, right? And yeah, I know the problems were there in the passing game. Sometimes it's the play calling. Some people think it's the route combinations. I'm not about to go into all of that right here. But what I can say is, again, this was mismanaged. If he wanted to keep Baker out there, cool. I'm fine with that, right? If Baker's cleared to play and he can practice, he should play, right? He is the starting quarterback. And, your backup's Case Keenum. I don't really have much faith in him. So I'm fine with Baker starting out the rest of the year. But if that was the case and you knew you weren't getting great stuff out of Baker, you still can't have him go out there and throw the ball 40 times. He's never been great when you throw the ball that much, right? Like, that's never been his thing, is a guy who's going to be able to throw the ball a lot. You've always wanted to keep Baker under 35 pass attempts. The fact that the pass attempts went up at the end of the season makes no sense to me. And I don't think it was a great decision there by Kevin Stefanski. I think, again, another growing moment here. If the quarterback play is not going the way you want it to, you can't spend the whole season trying to fix it. You just have to accept it is what it is and move on with something else and try to adjust and win a different way. And instead of doing that, I think he got very stubborn and really tried to make this passing thing work. And as the season went on, it got worse for Baker. It really did. The play got so bad at the end of the year to the point to where Baker just didn't play that last game. So, again, I'm putting a lot of that on Kevin Stefanski. Not the bad play by Baker, but the fact that Baker was playing that bad and you still passed the ball as much. I think that's fair to put on Kevin Stefanski. And then the play calling. There's some questionable play calls. I think, honestly, out of all the criticisms of Kevin Stefanski, this might be the most overblown one just because it's hard to see what was play calling's fault, what was the quarterback's fault, what was the running back's fault. When you're looking at play calling for a team that didn't execute as well, I think the things behind the scenes are a little bit more important and more pressing, right? Why was the execution so bad? Why were so many different situations mishandled? Odell, Baker, the play calling, the running game, right? Why was all of this stuff mishandled? I think that's a lot more important than whether he play called a good game or not, because honestly, I don't think the play calling was that terrible. I think it was bad in certain spots. I think, he does have a tendency to get a little bit conservative, especially when up with the lead. But, I felt like in other times he had some pretty decent play calls given what he was out there with at the end of the season. Now we're going to talk about some good things with Kevin. These are kind of like half good things. Look, there wasn't that much good with the offense. And with the stuff that we associate with Kevin Stefanski. The defense was great, but I don't think any of us associate that with Kevin Stefanski. But he won 2 games with Case Keenum. I would say that's pretty smart and good. I think it's kind of frustrating, right? Because when you can win those games with Case Keenum, what were they doing? They were leaning on the run game. Why couldn't we do that when Baker Mayfield was in there? Why did we have to throw the ball 40 times with Baker Mayfield when he hasn't been playing well at all? Why do we have to do that? Why couldn't we have the same mentality for a Case Keenum game that we would have for a Baker Mayfield game and to just use Baker in small chunks? I think that would have been better for Baker. I think that would have been better for the team. And I think we would have won more games if that would have happened. But unfortunately, I think we kind of got frustrated and tried to force something to work that just didn't work to prove a point. And again, it kind of goes back to the Odell thing. Like a part of me feels like the stubbornness at the end of the season to not give up the passing game or to not lean on the running game more was to try to prove a point about Odell and how his freelancing was ruining the offense, when it's pretty clear that there was a lot of other things ruining the offense other than just Odell and whatever he was doing. There were multiple factors in why that offense stunk before him and why it stunk after him. So, I'm not a fan of that. I don't want to see any of these things repeat next year. The seat's going to get hot for him if these same exact issues come up again next year, right? Nobody likes regression, but nobody also likes repetition of regression. So these things, right? The mismanagement stuff, the stuff where it's like common sense mismanagement, that stuff can't come up again next year, right? He still found a way to be 8-9, so he's not going to get an F just because they were still in playoff contention until like the last 2 weeks of the season. And F season is when you draft in the top 10 and you like what the Jaguars had. That's a F season. This season for Kevin Stefanski, I'm gonna give it a strong D+. It is a D+, not a B, a D as in Daryl. It is a D+, just so everybody's clear. Bad year. Needs to be better next year, right? I think he needs to, if he wants to avoid the hot seat for the year after, I would say he needs to have a B and above season next year. If he does that, all is well and all is forgiven with him, and we don't really care about anything that happened this year. We'll write it off. Much like we did with Baker Mayfield's 2019, but much like we're doing with Baker Mayfield right now, if he does have another bad year that repeats these same issues, we're going to be a lot less patient with Kevin Stefanski down the line. So he cannot have another year like this, because if he does, people ain't going to have patience. I'm not going to have patience with that, because a lot of this stuff was kind of ridiculous this year. But that's my grade on Kevin Stefanski, a D+. I think that's fair, given that, how bad you have to be an F. You know what I mean? Like, Urban Meyer's a F, and he like kicked a dude and got fired in the middle of the year. You know what I mean? Like, that's F behavior. He wasn't anywhere near that. But I think D+ is fair for him. Just a below average year as a coach, a confidence shaking year as a coach, and hopefully he can shake back and be good next year. We'll see. We'll see with him. But that's my grade on Kevin. Let me know what your grade is down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.